Jake Sullivan stood motionless outside the royal chamber, doing his best to ignore the ache spreading through his shoulders. The armor wasn't helping. The Kethal-designed combat suit had been modified for human proportions, but modified clearly meant someone had looked at a human anatomy chart for 3 seconds and declared the problem solved. The reinforced shoulder plates sat too high. The chest section felt like it had been built around a refrigerator. Every movement reminded Jake that this gear had originally been designed for warriors nearly a foot taller and twice as heavy as he was. 8 years as a Marine had taught him how to endure discomfort. But this armor was testing that lesson. The palace corridor stretched endlessly in both directions. Walls of polished violet stone reflected the glow of floating light spheres that drifted near the ceiling like miniature moons. The air carried the faint scent of exotic flowers and expensive incense. Everything about the palace screamed wealth, power, and excess. Even the hallway was oversized. The Kethal Empire built everything on a grand scale because its people averaged 7 feet in height and seemed physically incapable of doing anything modestly. At exactly 6 feet tall, Jake often felt like a teenager wandering through an adult world. Not that he'd ever admit it. He maintained his post, eyes forward. Alert. Professional. Unmoving. A shadow passed across the floor. Then came a familiar voice. "Still standing, human?" Jake suppressed a sigh. "Commander Vrek." Of course. The towering officer strode down the corridor without breaking pace. His deep blue scales almost appeared black beneath the palace lighting, and his orange eyes gleamed with amusement. His upper arms folded across his chest. A gesture Jake had learned was the Kethal equivalent of a smirk. "I assumed you would have resigned by now," Vrek continued. "There are easier ways for humans to earn credits." Jake kept his gaze forward. "There are easier ways for Kethal commanders to annoy people too, sir." The commander's steps slowed. Jake could practically feel the alien staring at him. Then came a low, rumbling laugh. "You humans are strange. That's what everyone keeps telling me." Vrek stopped beside him and looked toward the massive doors of the royal chamber. "You've been here 6 months." His tone shifted slightly. Less mocking, more curious. "Most off-world guards request reassignment after a few weeks, yet you remain." Jake finally glanced toward him. "Maybe I'm stubborn." The commander's sharp teeth flashed briefly. "No." His orange eyes narrowed. "That's not it." For a moment, neither spoke. Beyond the royal doors waited the most powerful individual in the empire. Thousands of guards competed for the honor of serving near the royal family. Yet somehow a human outsider had earned a permanent position. Many Kethal officers still found that fact irritating. Others found it suspicious. Vrek found it interesting. "One day," the commander said quietly, "I think I'm going to discover what you're really doing here." Jake smiled. A calm, easy smile that somehow made the giant alien even more suspicious. "Good luck with that, Commander." Vrek stared at him for another second before shaking his head. Then he continued down the corridor. As the commander's footsteps faded into the distance, Jake returned his attention to the royal chamber doors. Outwardly, he looked like nothing more than a human security contractor. Just another guard standing watch. But hidden beneath the oversized armor, Jake carried secrets that could shake an empire. And before this day was over, those secrets might not stay hidden much longer. Jake kept his eyes forward. "No, sir. Still here." Fick made a sound like grinding rocks, which was Kethal laughter. 1 month. You have lasted 1 month. The betting pool says you will not make it to 2. He walked away, his heavy footsteps echoing down the corridor. It was true that Jake was the first human to ever serve in the Royal Guard. It was also true that nobody wanted him here, except the politicians who thought it would look good for species relations. The other guards treated him like a mascot at best, and a liability at worst. They were warriors from the military caste, bred and trained from birth. Jake was just some human who'd signed a contract. The door behind him slid open with a soft hiss. Jake turned to see Queen Zerthal step into the hallway. She was smaller than most Kethal, only about 6.5 feet tall, and young by their standards. She'd been queen for less than a year since her mother had died from a wasting sickness that their doctors couldn't cure. "Guard Sullivan," she said. her voice carrying that musical quality that all Kethal had. They had 3 vocal cords instead of 2, which let them hit notes humans couldn't. "You may walk with me to the garden." "Yes, Your Majesty." Jake fell in to step beside her, his hand resting on the plasma rifle at his side. 2 other guards joined them from their posts down the hall, flanking them at a distance. They didn't acknowledge Jake's existence. The Queen walked slowly, her long robes trailing behind her. She wore silver today, which meant she was receiving the colonial governors later. Jake had spent his first week memorizing what all the colors meant. It was part of the cultural training packet they'd given him, along with 17 different rules about eye contact and posture, and when he was allowed to speak. "How are you finding the palace?" the Queen asked. Jake was surprised she was talking to him. Usually the guards were furniture meant to be ignored. "It's impressive, Your Majesty. Very different from Earth." "I have never seen Earth," she said. "Is it true that your planet has water covering most of its surface?" "Yes, Your Majesty. About 70%. Remarkable." She paused at a window that looked out over the capital city. Towers of crystal and metal stretched toward the sky, and flying vehicles zipped between them like insects. "My people come from a dry world. Water was always precious to us." The idea of ocean seems almost wasteful. Jake didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. The Queen turned to look at him. Her eyes were large and golden with vertical pupils like a cat. "The other guards do not treat you well." It wasn't a question, but Jake answered anyway. "They're professional, Your Majesty." "You are kind to say so." She resumed walking. "My mother believed that the Empire needed to change. She thought we relied too much on tradition, that we needed new perspectives. That is why she began allowing other species into positions that were once only for Kethal." "I'm honored to serve," Jake said, "because that seemed like the right thing to say." "Are you?" The Queen glanced at him. "Even when you are treated as less than you are." Jake thought about that. "My grandmother used to say that respect is earned, not given. Maybe I just haven't earned it yet." The Queen made a soft humming sound. "Perhaps. Or perhaps some people will never give respect to those they consider beneath them, no matter what is earned." She stopped walking. They had reached the garden, a vast open space filled with plants from a dozen worlds. "Thank you for your honesty, Guard Sullivan. You may wait here." Jake took up position by the entrance while the Queen walked into the garden. The other 2 guards positioned themselves at different points, creating a triangle of coverage. They still didn't look at Jake. The day continued like that. Jake stood at his posts, walked his patrols, and tried not to think about how much the other guards disliked him. He ate his meals alone in the human quarters, a small section of the palace set aside for the handful of humans who worked there. Ambassador Amy Harrison sometimes joined him, but today she was off-world for some conference. That evening, Jake was walking the north corridor when he ran into Prince Korath. The prince was the Queen's uncle, her mother's younger brother, and he'd expected to inherit the throne before the old Queen had chosen her daughter instead. He was massive, even for a Cathal, nearly 8 feet tall, and broad across the shoulders. "The human guard," Korath said, blocking the hallway. His voice was deeper than the Queen's, more aggressive. "Tell me, small creature, do you truly believe you could protect our Queen if danger came?" Jake kept his voice neutral. "I would do my duty, Your Highness." "Your duty?" Kor laughed, a harsh sound. "You cannot even lift a warrior sword. You cannot wear proper armor. You are decoration, nothing more." My niece's foolish gesture to her mother's memory. "I respectfully disagree, Your Highness." Korath's eyes narrowed. "You have spirit. I will grant you that. But spirit does not stop blades or turn aside weapons. When the time comes, you will break like all soft things break." He pushed past Jake, his shoulder knocking Jake back a step. Jake watched him go, a cold feeling in his gut. That hadn't felt like casual contempt. That had felt like a threat. 3 days later, Commander Rek called a meeting of all the guards. They gathered in the training hall, a huge room with weapons lining the walls and combat circles marked on the floor. Jake stood at the back as usual. "We are deploying to the Summer Palace," Rick announced. "The Queen will host a diplomatic summit there in 1 week. All colonial governors will attend, as well as representatives from the other species in the Empire. Security will be at maximum level." A guard near the front raised one of his 4 hands. "What is the threat assessment?" "Standard for a large gathering," Rex said. "However, there has been unrest in the outer colonies. Some governors have been slow to send their tribute. We must be prepared for anything." After the meeting, Jake tried to approach Rek with a question about the deployment schedule, but the commander waved him off. You will be assigned to interior posts, human. We cannot risk having you in any critical position. Sir, I'm qualified for what? You are qualified for what I say you are qualified for. Bree's voice was hard. You will guard hallways and stand at doors. The real work will be done by real warriors. Jake bit back his response and nodded. There was no point arguing. The flight to the Summer Palace took 6 hours on the royal transport. Jake spent most of it looking out the window at the landscape below. The moon of Kethal Prime was terraformed centuries ago, covered in forests and lakes that looked almost Earth-like from above. The Summer Palace sat on an island in the middle of a vast inland sea, all white stone and golden spires. When they landed, Jake was immediately assigned to the most boring post possible, standing outside the Queen's personal chambers on the residence level. It was quiet up there, away from all the activity of the main palace, just him and his thoughts. The summit began 2 days later. Jake watched from his post as delegates arrived, species he'd only seen in briefings. The Cathal governors came with their entourages, each trying to outdo the others in displays of wealth and power. Prince Korath arrived with the largest group of all, nearly 50 attendants and guards of his own. Something about it bothered Jake, but he couldn't put his finger on what. He mentioned it to Amy Harrison when she passed by his post. You're paranoid, she said, but she was smiling. That's why you're good at this job. Just a feeling, Jake said. Trust your instincts. Amy's smile faded a bit, but don't do anything rash. The political situation here is delicate. The Queen is still consolidating power, and Prince Korath has a lot of support among the traditionalists. Understood. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in his quarters, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the prince's words in the hallway. When the time comes, you will break like all soft things break. Had that been a general insult or something more specific? He got up and checked his gear. Rifle charged, armor sealed properly, emergency beacon active. Everything was as it should be, but the uneasy feeling remained. The ceremonial dinner was scheduled for the next evening. All the delegates would be there dressed in their finest. It was meant to be a show of unity, the Queen presiding over her empire like her mother had done. Jake was assigned to stand guard in the corridor outside the Great Hall. He could hear music and voices from inside, the sound of hundreds of beings gathered for a feast. The commander Vrek and his best warriors were. The Great Hall was chaos. Jake fought his way through the smoke and debris, his rifle barking as he moved. Dead and wounded lay everywhere, delegates and guards alike. The attackers wore no insignia, but they moved like professional soldiers. This had been planned. Commander Rex's voice crackled over the comm, and Jake's helmet. All guards fall back to secondary position. Protect the Queen. Move now. Jake saw Rek ahead, his forearms working 2 weapons at once as he laid down covering fire. A group of guards had formed a protective circle around Queen Zerthiel, who looked shaken but unheard. Her silver robes were torn and stained with ash. Sullivan Frick shouted when he saw Jake with us. Move! They fought their way through the palace, the attackers pressing them from multiple directions. Jake realized with cold certainty that the enemy knew exactly where they were going. Every turn they took, every corridor they tried, there were more black-armored soldiers waiting. The bunker, Rex said over the comm. We make for the secure bunker below the palace. Once we are sealed inside, we can call for reinforcements. The bunker was 3 levels down, accessed through a hidden entrance in the royal wing. Jake had studied the palace layout during his training, but he'd never actually been inside the bunker. It was supposed to be impregnable, able to withstand anything short of orbital bombardment. They reached the entrance, a section of wall that looked like every other section of wall, until Rek pressed his hand to it. The stone slid aside, revealing a stairway leading down into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on automatically. Go, Breck ordered. 6 guards went first, weapons ready. Then the Queen, supported by 2 more guards. Then Rek and the remaining warriors with Jake bringing up the rear. The stairway was narrow and steep, designed to be defensible. Jake kept his rifle pointed back the way they'd come, expecting attackers to pour through the entrance at any moment, but none came. The entrance sealed behind them with a heavy thunk. They descended in near silence, just the sound of footsteps and heavy breathing. The Queen hadn't said a word since the attack began. Jake caught glimpses of her face in the emergency lighting. She looked scared, which made sense. Someone had just tried to kill her in her own palace. The bunker itself was bigger than Jake expected. It was a series of connected rooms, carved out of solid rock with reinforced walls, and a single entrance that was protected by a blast door thick enough to stop a tank. The main room had communications equipment, weapons racks, and supplies for a prolonged siege. "Secure the entrance," Rick commanded. 4 guards took up positions by the blast door, while the others spread out through the bunker, checking the other rooms. The Queen sank into a chair, her hands shaking. Jake stayed near the door, his rifle ready. Something felt wrong. The attack had been too coordinated, too precise, and why had the attackers let them reach the bunker so easily? Falk was at the communications console, his multiple hands working the controls, sending distress signals now. "The nearest military base is 4 hours away. We need to hold until they arrive." One of the guards approached Rek and spoke in the Cathal language. Too fast and quiet for Jake to follow with his limited knowledge. Frek's expression changed, his orange eyes widening slightly. "Are you certain?" Rek asked in the same language. The guard nodded and handed Rek a small device. Frick stared at it for a long moment, then looked around the bunker at his warriors. Some of them were watching him, Jake noticed, waiting for something. The commander's posture changed. He straightened, his forearms relaxing. "Guards," he said, "prepare to move out." Jake blinked. "Sir, move out where?" Frake didn't look at him. "There is a secondary exit. We cannot remain here." "But you just said the bunker was secure," Jake protested. "You said we'd wait for reinforcements." "Plans have changed, human." Rex's voice was flat, emotionless. "We are leaving now." The Queen stood up, confused. "Commander, I do not understand. Is there a threat to the bunker? Your Majesty, please trust me. We must go." Bray gestured to his guards. They moved toward a door at the back of the main room, one Jake hadn't noticed before. "Where does that lead?" Jake asked. "To the old mining tunnels beneath the palace. They connect to the surface 3 kilometers from here. We can escape through them." Breck walked toward the door and his guards followed. Jake's instincts screamed at him. "And what about the people attacking the palace? Won't they be watching those tunnels too?" Frick paused. For a moment, Jake thought he saw something in the commander's eyes. Regret, maybe. Or pity. "That is not your concern, human. Sir, with respect, our job is to protect the Queen. Running away seems your job is to follow orders." Rex's voice was hard now. "Or do humans not understand duty?" The other guards were already at the tunnel entrance. One of them had opened the door, revealing darkness beyond. They filed through quickly, professionally, like they'd practiced this. Jake looked at Queen Zerthal. She was watching Rek with growing alarm. "Commander, why are your guards leaving without me?" Vic didn't answer. He just turned and walked toward the tunnel door. "Commander." The Queen's voice was sharp now, commanding. "I order you to answer me." Vree stopped at the threshold. He turned back, and Jake saw it clearly now in his face. "Shame. I am sorry, Your Majesty. Truly. But some battles cannot be won. Some causes are already lost." "What are you saying?" The Queen took a step forward. "You are my royal guard. You swore oaths to protect me." "Oaths are words," Rex said quietly. "Words do not stop plasma rounds. They do not feed families, or protect them from reprisal. Prince Korath offered us a choice. Stand with you and die, or stand aside and live. We chose life." The Queen's face went pale, her skin shifting to a lighter shade of blue. "Korath, this was my uncle's doing. He has the support of the military caste, and most of the colonial governors. Your mother's reforms angered too many powerful beings. This coup was inevitable." Rick looked at Jake. "The human guard may leave with us. We bear him no ill will. He is not Cathel. This is not his fight." Jake tightened his grip on his rifle. "You're abandoning her." "We are surviving." Rex said there is a difference. Corps forces know exactly where this bunker is. They will breach it within the hour. Anyone inside will die. I am offering you a chance to live, human. Take it." The other guards were already through the tunnel entrance. Vrey took one last look at the Queen, something like regret crossing his face. Then he spoke in English, his accent thick but understandable. "Your honor will be your death, human. This was always the plan." He stepped through the doorway and sealed it behind him. Jake heard locks engaging, heavy bolts sliding into place. The tunnel was one way. There would be no following them. For a long moment, there was silence in the bunker. Jake and the Queen stood alone in the main room, the reality of the situation sinking in. "They left," the Queen said softly. Her voice sounded hollow. "My own guards, warriors who swore sacred oaths. They just left. Jake checked his rifle charge. 80%. He had 3 spare power cells in his armor. Good for about 400 shots total. The bunker's weapons rack had more weapons, more ammunition. It wasn't much, but it was something. Your Majesty, Jake said, moving to the blast door controls. Do you know how to work the bunker systems? The Queen looked at him confused. What? The defenses, the sensors, the door controls. Can you operate them? Yes. I was trained in emergency protocols. But Guard Sullivan, you should go take the tunnel. You can still check. No, ma'am. Jake began checking the blast door's integrity. It was solid, but Vree had been right. If Korth's forces knew where the bunker was, they could breach it given enough time and firepower. I'm staying. Why? The Queen moved closer to him, her golden eyes searching his face. You owe me nothing. Commander Vrek was correct. This is not your fight. You are human. You can walk away from this and no one would blame you. Jake thought about that. She was right in a way. He'd known the Queen for all of 4 weeks. He'd signed a contract for a security job, not a suicide mission. He could try to find another way out, maybe surrender to Korath's forces, and claim he was just following orders. But then he thought about his grandmother who'd raised him after his parents died. She'd been a tough woman, a veteran herself. And she taught him that character was what you did when no one was watching, when there was no reward, no recognition, no guarantee of success. Character was doing the right thing, because it was right, not because it was easy. Ma'am, I was a Marine before I took this job. Jake said, we had a saying, we don't leave people behind. Doesn't matter if they're American or not, human or not. If someone needs help and I can give it, I stay. You will die. There were tears in the Queen's eyes now. Something Jake hadn't known Kethel could do. We will both die. My uncle will kill us. Maybe. Jake moved to the weapons rack and started pulling down rifles and power cells, building a defensive position near the blast door, but he's going to have to work for it. A sound came from outside the bunker, distant but growing closer. Footsteps, lots of them. The Queen stood frozen for a moment, then seemed to gather herself. She wiped her eyes and moved to the communications console. If we are making a stand, we should at least make it a proper one. I can access the bunker's automated defenses from here. There are turrets hidden in the walls outside the blast door. The blast door held through the first assault. Jake watched on the security monitors as armored soldiers tried to force it open, then fell back when the automated turrets opened fire. 3 bodies lay on the floor outside before the attackers retreated around the corner. They are probing our defenses, the Queen said from the communications console. She'd pulled up tactical displays showing the bunker status. Testing to see what we have. Standard approach, Jake agreed. He was checking his ammunition and planning his next moves. The bunker was defensible, but it wasn't perfect. The blast door was the choke point, the only way in. That was good and bad. Good because the attackers couldn't flank them. Bad because once that door came down, they had nowhere to retreat. The second assault came 15 minutes later. This time, the attackers used a different tactic. They sent in a small robot barely 2 feet tall that scuttled forward on 6 legs. Jake spotted it on the monitors and swore. What is that? The Queen asked. Breaching charge. Probably electromagnetic. Jake aimed carefully at the camera feed and watched the robot. It reached the blast door and attached itself to the surface. Get away from the console now. The Queen jumped back just as the charge detonated. The electromagnetic pulse fried the automated turrets and most of the bunker's electronic systems. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Well, that's not good, Jake muttered. He pulled out a small device from his kit, a manual DAR monitor his old sergeant had taught him to carry. It was low-tech, just a fiber optic cable he could slip under the door to see what was on the other side. He ran to the blast door and fed the cable through. The monitor showed exactly what he expected. Soldiers setting up heavy equipment, preparing to cut through the door. They had time, but not much. Your Majesty, I need you to tell me everything this bunker has. Every weapon, every defensive system, every piece of equipment that might help us. The Queen moved through the bunker rooms quickly, taking inventory. Jake used the time to prepare. He grabbed every plasma rifle from the weapons rack, lining them up near his position. When one overheated or ran out of charge, he'd grab the next. He found grenades, flashbangs, even some old projectile weapons that used physical ammunition instead of energy. There are emergency rations for 30 days, the Queen called from the storage room. M supplies, Water recycling systems. She emerged with her arms full of equipment. And these? I am not sure what they are. Jake looked at what she was carrying. Proximity mines. Excellent. He took them and started placing them in strategic locations around the bunker's entrance. If the attackers breached the door, these would give them a nasty surprise. The Queen watched him work. You have done this before. Fought against overwhelming numbers. Different circumstances. But yeah. Jake armed another mine and positioned it carefully. Did 3 tours in hostile territory back on Earth. You learn to work with what you have. I have never been in combat. The Queen's voice was quiet. I was trained for diplomacy for statecraft. My mother believed the age of warrior queens was past. She might have been right. In a better world, Jake finished with the mines and moved back to his firing position. But this isn't that world. Not right now. The cutting equipment outside started up. Jake could see the bright glow through the monitor as industrial lasers began slicing through the blast door. The metal was thick, reinforced with compounds designed to withstand tremendous force. But given enough time, anything could be cut. How long? The Queen asked. 3 hours, maybe 4. Depends on their equipment. Jake checked his rifle again. It was a nervous habit, something to do with his hands. Your Majesty, I need to know something. Is there anyone out there who might help us? Any allies? Any ships in orbit? Anything? The Queen thought for a moment. Ambassador Harrison might be able to reach the human fleet, but communications are blocked, and she may not even know what has happened yet. The bunker sent out a distress signal before the EMP, right? Yes, but if my uncle controls the military, he controls the signal relays. He could have intercepted it or blocked it entirely. Jake nodded. That's what he figured. They were on their own. An hour passed. The cutting continued steady and methodical. The Queen sat with her back against the wall, watching Jake prepare. He'd built a defensive position out of equipment crates, giving himself cover and multiple angles to fire from. He'd set up a fallback position too, deeper in the bunker in case the first position was overrun. May I ask you something? The Queen said suddenly. Sure. What is Earth like? I have seen images, but images do not tell me what it feels like to be there. Jake smiled a little, thinking about home. It's beautiful. Lots of water, like you said. Blue skies, green forests, mountains and deserts. And everything in between. Where I grew up in Colorado, you could see mountains from our house. Snow on the peaks. Even in summer. Do you miss it? Every day, Jake looked at her. Do you miss anything from before all this? The Queen was quiet for a moment. I miss my mother. She was not always a good queen. I think she made enemies with her reforms. But she tried to make the empire better, more fair. She believed that strength should protect, not dominate. She sounds like a good person. She was. The Queen wiped at her eyes again. I wish I could have had more time with her to learn to understand how to rule as she did. I feel as though I am playing at being queen, wearing her crown without earning it. You're earning it now, Jake said, standing here when you could have surrendered. That takes guts or foolishness. Sometimes they're the same thing. Jake grinned. My grandmother used to say that bravery is just fear that said its prayers and got to work anyway. The Queen actually smiled at that. I like your grandmother. She sounds wise. She was tough as nails. Raised me by herself after my parents died in a transport accident. Never complained, never gave up. Just kept going day after day. Jake checked the monitor again. The cutting was about halfway through. She's the reason I became a Marine. She said the world needed people who would stand up when it mattered. And is that why you are standing up now for me? Jake thought about how to answer that partly, but also because it's the right thing to do. Your uncle murdered people tonight, innocent delegates who came here in peace. He betrayed his own family. Someone needs to tell him that's not okay, even if all I can do is make him work harder for his victory. The Queen stood and came to the defensive position. Teach me to shoot, ma'am. If we are making a stand, I will not simply hide behind you. Her golden eyes were determined. Show me how to use these weapons. Jake hesitated, then nodded. Okay, come here. He spent the next hour teaching Queen Zerthal the basics of marksmanship, how to hold the rifle, how to aim, how to compensate for recoil. She was a quick learner, her 4-fingered hands adapting to the weapon grips more easily than he expected. The key is smooth trigger pull, Jake explained. Don't jerk it. Squeeze gently like you're holding something delicate. The Queen practiced her grip, her stance improving with each repetition. How do you remain so calm? We are about to fight for our lives. And you are teaching me as though we have all the time in the world. Panicking doesn't help anyone. Jake adjusted her elbow position. In combat, you focus on what you can control. Your breathing, your aim, your movement. Everything else is just noise. They practiced until the Queen could hit a target across the bunker with reasonable accuracy. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. And Jake could see it helping her, giving her something to focus on besides fear. The cutting equipment outside suddenly stopped. Jake checked the monitor and felt his stomach drop. The door was almost through. He could see light from the other side now. A thin line around the edges of the cut. They're about to breach, he said. Get to the fallback position. No. The Queen picked up a rifle and took position beside him. I am not hiding. Not anymore. Jake wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. He could hear voices outside, orders being shouted. The attackers were preparing for their assault. Stay behind cover, he said. Don't expose yourself. Aim for center mass and keep firing until they stop moving. If I tell you to fall back, you fall back. Understood? Understood. The blast door groaned as something hit it from outside. Once, twice. On the third hit, the cut section fell inward, with a crash of metal on stone. Soldiers poured through the opening. Jake opened fire immediately, his rifle sending plasma bolts into the mass of bodies. The proximity mines detonated, throwing attackers back in clouds of smoke and debris. The Queen fired too, her shots less accurate than Jake's, but still effective at the close range. For 30 seconds, it was chaos. The attackers tried to push through, and Jake cut them down. Bodies piled up in the entrance, making it harder for the next wave to advance. His rifle overheated, and he grabbed another, maintaining steady fire. Then the attackers fell back, dragging their wounded with them. Jake counted 8 bodies that didn't move. His hands were shaking from the adrenaline. Did we win? The Queen asked, her voice breathless. No. Jake was already reloading, replacing power cells. That was just the first wave. They'll be back. And they were. Over the next 2 hours, the attackers came at them again and again. Each assault was different. Testing their defenses from the next assault was different. Instead of rushing through the door, the attackers sent in more robots. Small ones that skittered along the walls and ceiling, equipped with cameras and weapons. Jake shot 3 of them before they could get close, but a 4th got past him and opened fire. The plasma bolt hit his shoulder, spinning him around. Pain exploded through his body, and he dropped his rifle. The Queen screamed and fired at the robot, her shots going wide. Jake forced himself to move, grabbing a pistol from his belt with his good hand and putting 2 rounds through the robot's center mass. It sparked and died. Sullivan, the Queen, was at his side, her hands hovering over his shoulder, not sure what to do. I'm okay, Jake lied. The pain was intense, but the shot had hit his armor's shoulder plate. It was compromised now. The protective material burned through, but it had absorbed most of the blast. His arm still worked barely. You are not okay. You are bleeding. The Queen pulled him back from the defensive position. We need to treat this later. They're coming again, but the Queen ignored him. She grabbed a medical kit from the supplies and forced him to sit. Her hands were surprisingly steady as she applied burn gel to the wound and wrapped it with synthetic bandages. The gel numbed the pain, turning the screaming agony into a dull throb. Thank you, Jake said. You have been wounded defending me. It is the least I can do. The Queen helped him stand. Can you still fight? Jake tested his arm. It hurt, but it moved. Yeah, I can fight. They returned to the defensive position. Jake checked their remaining ammunition and weapons. 2 power cells for the rifles, 1 for the pistol, a handful of grenades. The situation was not good, Your Majesty, Jake said carefully. I need you to consider something. What is it? They're going to breach this position eventually. When they do, I want you to surrender. The Queen stared at him. What? You're the Queen. You're valuable alive. Kor might have you killed eventually, but he'll keep you alive at first. That gives people time to mount a rescue, or for the political situation to change. Jake met her eyes. Me? I'm just a human guard. I'm expendable. But you're not. No. The Queen's voice was firm. I will not surrender and leave you to die alone. Ma'am, no. You stayed with me when everyone else ran. You fought beside me when you had every reason to flee. I will not abandon you now. We stand together, or we fall together. Jake wanted to argue more, but the determination in her voice stopped him. She meant it. She was going to see this through to the end, whatever that end looked like. "All right then," he said together. Prince Kor's voice came over the calm again. "My dear niece, you have fought admirably. Longer than I expected, I will admit. Your human guard has proven more capable than I anticipated. But this ends now. I am bringing in heavy weapons. In 10 minutes, what remains of that door will be obliterated. You cannot survive that." The queen grabbed the commune. "Then you will have to kill your own niece, uncle. Is that the legacy you want? The prince who murdered family to take power. History is written by victors," Korath replied. "And I have already won. Goodbye, Zarathil." The comm went silent. Jake and the queen looked at each other. 10 minutes. That was all they had left. "I want you to know something," the queen said. "In the short time we have known each other, you have shown me what true honor looks like. Not the ceremonial honor of oaths and traditions, but real honor, the kind that acts when action is needed." "I'm just doing my job," Jake said. "No, you're doing far more than that." She smiled sadly. "If we had more time, I would have liked to learn more about humans, about Earth, about what makes your people so stubborn and brave. Maybe you still will. Maybe the wall exploded. Not the blast door, the actual wall, 30 feet to the left of their defensive position." Jake barely had time to process what was happening before debris rained down on them. Something must have hit his head, because suddenly he was on the ground, his ears ringing, dust and smoke everywhere. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't work right. His vision swam through the smoke. He could see figures moving, lots of them. The queen was somewhere nearby. He could hear her coughing. Jake's hand found his pistol. He raised it, trying to aim at the advancing shapes. His arm felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He fired once, twice, missed both times. A soldier appeared through the smoke rifle, pointed at Jake's head. This was it. This was how it ended. Then something strange happened. The soldier's head snapped back, and he fell. Another soldier appeared, and the same thing happened. Jake could hear weapons fire now, but it wasn't coming from inside the bunker. It was coming from outside, from the hole in the wall. "Hold your fire. Friendlies incoming." The voice was speaking English, accented but clear. A figure dropped through the hole in the wall, moving fast. Combat armor, but different from what the attackers wore. Heavier, bulkier. The kind of armor human Marines used for heavy assault operations. More figures followed. Jake counted 6 of them, all in human armor, all carrying human weapons. They moved through the bunker with practiced efficiency, clearing corners and checking threats. One of them knelt beside Jake. The helmet retracted, revealing a woman's face, dark skin, and short hair. She had sergeant stripes on her collar. "You guard Sullivan?" she asked. Jake managed to nod. "Yeah, that's me. Sergeant Kate Morrison, Colonial Marines attached to the frigate Liberty. We got your distress call. Sorry it took so long to get here." She looked around the bunker, taking in the bodies, the damage, the signs of the long battle. "Hell of a stand you made." The queen managed to say. "Is she?" "We got her. She's okay. Shaken up, but okay." Morrison helped Jake sit up. "Can you walk? Give me a minute." Morrison turned to her squad. "Perimeter secure. Get the medac in here, and somebody find whoever's in charge of this mess, and tell them the humans are not happy." Through the smoke and dust, Jake could see Queen Zerthal being helped by another Marine. She looked dazed but uninjured. When she saw Jake, her face lit up with relief. More soldiers were pouring into the bunker now, human and Kethel both. Jake recognized some of the Kethel uniforms as military forces loyal to the Queen. The coup was over, or at least this part of it was. Morrison's medic, a young guy named Pete, started working on Jake's wounds. The shoulder burned, the head wound he hadn't even known he had, various cuts and bruises from the fight. Pete worked quickly and efficiently, applying advanced medical foam and injecting him with something that made the pain fade to almost nothing. "You're going to be okay," Pete said. "Nothing here that won't heal, though. You're going to have some impressive scars." Jake barely heard him. He was watching the Queen, who was arguing with a Kethal officer about something. Even now, covered in dust and exhausted, she carried herself like royalty. She'd been terrified when the attack started, but she'd found her courage when it mattered. The Queen finished her conversation and made her way over to Jake. The Marines gave her space, recognizing authority when they saw it. "Guard Sullivan," she said formally. Then her composure broke and she knelt beside him, taking his hand in both of hers. "You saved my life. You held them off until help could arrive. I do not have words to properly thank you. Just doing my job, Your Majesty." "No." She squeezed his hand. "You stayed when my own guards fled. You fought when you could have surrendered. You offered to die so I might live. That is not just duty. That is something greater." Jake didn't know what to say to that. Fortunately, Sergeant Morrison interrupted. "Majesty, we need to get you both out of here. The palace is secure, but there might be holdouts. Captain Parker has the Liberty in orbit, and he's not taking chances." The Queen nodded and released Jake's hand. "Of course, but I go nowhere without Guard Sullivan." "Wouldn't dream of separating you, ma'am," Morrison said with a smile. They helped Jake to his feet. He was unsteady, but he could walk with assistance. The Marines formed a protective escort as they moved through the bunker and up into the palace proper. The damage was extensive. Bodies lay everywhere. Attackers and defenders both. Fires still burned in some sections. Jake could hear distant weapons fire as pockets of resistance were cleared out. In the main courtyard, a human dropship waited, its engines idling. The pilot waved them aboard. As they climbed the ramp, Jake looked back at the summer palace. It had been beautiful once. Now it was a war zone. The Queen sat beside him in the dropship, still holding his hand. Neither of them spoke during the short flight up to the Liberty. There would be time for words later. For now, they were both just trying to process everything that had happened. The Liberty was a small ship by military standards, a frigo designed for fast response and patrol duties. But to Jake, stepping into its clean corridors with its human crew and familiar smells, it felt like coming home. Captain Ben Parker met them in the medical bay. He was an older man, gray hair and sharp eyes, wearing a uniform that had seen better days, but was clean and pressed. He saluted the Queen formally. "Your Majesty, welcome aboard the Liberty. I wish the circumstances were better, as do I, Captain, but I am grateful for your timely arrival." The Queen looked tired, her earlier strength fading now that the immediate danger had passed. "How did you know to come?" "We intercepted your distress signal about 4 hours ago. It was garbled, but we got enough to know something was wrong. I contacted the capital city. Looked different when they returned. Banners hung from every building. The royal colors displayed prominently. Crowds lined the streets. Keithel citizens who wanted to see their queen return. They cheered as the royal transport passed. A sound like thunder that echoed off the crystal towers. Jake stood beside the queen in the transport, wearing new armor that had been specially made for him. It was a blend of human and Kethal design, lighter than what he'd worn before, but stronger. On his chest was a symbol he didn't recognize. 4 interlocking circles. "What does this mean?" he'd asked when they presented it to him. "It is the mark of a queen's champion," Ambassador Harrison had explained. She'd met them at the spaceport looking relieved and tired. "It hasn't been used in 300 years, but Zarathil is reviving the tradition. You're the first human to ever wear it." Now, riding through the capital with the crowds cheering, Jake felt the weight of that symbol. He wasn't just a guard anymore. He was something else, something that bridged the gap between species. The royal palace in the capital was bigger than the summer palace. All sweeping architecture and ancient stone. The throne room could hold 1,000 beings easily, and today, it looked like it was trying to. Every noble, every governor, every person of importance in the empire had come to witness what happened next. Jake stood at attention beside the throne as Queen Zerthal addressed her people. Her voice was strong, carrying through the hall with that musical quality that Kethal voices had. She spoke in her own language, but Jake's translator earpiece gave him the words. "My people," she said, "we have survived an attempt to destroy everything my mother built, an attempt to return us to the old ways where power was held through fear and strength alone. But we did not survive because of our weapons or our armies. We survived because of loyalty, because of honor, because one being chose to stand when he could have fled." She gestured to Jake and every eye in the room turned to him. He tried not to squirm under the attention. "This human, Jake Sullivan, was my guard for only 1 month. He barely knew me. He owed me nothing beyond his contract. Yet, when my own warriors abandoned me, when beings who had sworn sacred oaths chose their lives over their duty, this human stayed. He asked for nothing. He expected no reward. He simply refused to leave someone in need." The Queen stood from her throne and descended the steps. The crowd murmured in surprise. This wasn't part of the planned ceremony. "Kneel, Guard Sullivan," she commanded. Jake knelt, his heart pounding. He had no idea what was coming. The queen drew a ceremonial blade from her robes, a beautiful weapon with a curved edge that shimmered like water. She touched it to each of his shoulders, then to his forehead. "I name you Jake Sullivan, champion of the queen, defender of the crown, and noble of the first circle. You are granted lands, title, and the authority to speak in my name. Rise, and let all know that loyalty has its reward." Jake stood, his mind reeling. Noble authority to speak in her name. This was way beyond anything he'd expected. The crowd erupted in cheers, though Jake noticed some of the nobles looked less than thrilled. Change was never easy, especially when it elevated an outsider. The ceremony continued with other business. The trial of Prince Korath and his conspirators was announced to be held before a tribunal of judges from across the empire. Commander Vray and the guards who had fled would face their own trials, charged with abandoning their posts and breaking their oaths. Jake watched it all from his position beside the throne, trying to process his new reality. After the ceremony ended and the crowds dispersed, the queen invited him to her private chambers for a more informal conversation. "You look overwhelmed," she said, pouring him a drink from a crystal decanter. It was some kind of Kethal beverage that tasted like cinnamon and honey. "That's one word for it, Your Majesty." Jake took a sip. "I'm not sure I'm qualified to be a noble. Neither am I qualified to be queen yet." "Here we are." She sat across from him, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "We will learn together, you and I, how to lead, how to rebuild trust, how to create something better than what came before." Over the next 3 days, the trials dominated every news broadcast in the empire. Jake testified at Prince Korath's trial, describing the attack and the betrayal. The courtroom was packed, beings from a dozen species watching as the evidence was presented. Prince Korath showed no remorse. He stood before the tribunal with his head high, defending his actions. "I did what was necessary," he said. "My sister weakened the empire with her reforms. She gave power to lesser species, weakened our military traditions, showed mercy to those who deserved none. I tried to save us from her folly." "By murdering innocent delegates," the lead judge asked. "By attempting to kill your own niece." "Casualties of war," Korth said dismissively. "In the old days, succession was always violent. I simply followed tradition. The tribunal didn't take long to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Korthlis was sentenced to life imprisonment on a remote colony world, his titles and properties stripped away. It was a merciful sentence, considering what he'd done. The queen could have demanded execution, but she'd chosen a different path. "Let him live with his failure," she told Jake later. "Let him watch as the empire becomes everything he tried to prevent. That is a fitting punishment." Commander Rex's trial was different. The old warrior looked smaller, somehow diminished. When he testified, his voice was quiet. "I have no excuse," he said. "I was offered a choice between duty and survival, and I chose survival. I thought I was being practical, choosing life over a meaningless death. But I see now that some things are more important than life. Honor, loyalty, the trust placed in us by those we serve." He turned to look at Jake, who was sitting in the viewing gallery. "The human guard showed me what I should have been. He had less training, less experience, less reason to fight. Yet he stood when I ran. That shame will stay with me forever." The tribunal stripped Rek of his rank and banned him from ever serving in the military again. He was sentenced to 10 years of community service, helping to rebuild the parts of the capital that had been damaged in the coup. It was a lenient sentence considering, but the queen had argued for mercy. "He admitted his failure," she explained to Jake. "He took responsibility. That counts for something." The other guards received similar sentences. The empire was learning slowly that justice didn't have to mean destruction. Ambassador Harrison threw a small party at the human embassy a week after the trials ended. It was attended by human diplomats, Cathal nobles who supported the queen's reforms, and representatives from several other species. Jake found himself the center of attention, which was uncomfortable. "You've become famous," Harrison told him, handing him a glass of earth whiskey. "Every news service in the empire has done stories about you. The human who refused to run, the loyal guard. Some of the more dramatic ones are calling you the last defender. That's embarrassing. That's publicity." Harrison grinned. "Do you have any idea how much this has helped human-Keith relations? Before you, humans were seen as weak, too small, and fragile for serious work. Now we're being recruited for security positions across the Empire. Our reputation has completely changed. A young Cathal noble approached them, bowing formally. "Excuse me, Champion Sullivan. I wanted to express my admiration for your actions. My family serves in the military, and your stand has become required study at the Officer Academy. You showed us that courage is not about size or strength, but about will." After he left, more people came to talk to Jake. All of them wanted to hear the story firsthand, wanted to shake his hand, wanted to tell him how inspired they were. It was exhausting. The Queen rescued him eventually, suggesting they take a walk in the palace gardens. They strolled along paths lined with bioluminescent flowers that glowed softly in the evening light. "How are you adjusting?" she asked. "Still feels surreal," Jake admitted. "A month ago, I was just a security contractor. Now I'm a noble, with lands I've never seen, and a title I don't understand. Would you prefer to go back to your old life?" Jake thought about that. "No, I don't think so. This matters more. What we're doing here, trying to build something better." "We," the Queen repeated, smiling. "I like that. Too many beings see the throne as something separate, something above them. But we are in this together. You and I, Ambassador Harrison, all those who believe the Empire can be more than it was." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then the Queen spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "I have been considering the Royal Guard, how to rebuild it into something trustworthy. And I want you to train them, the new recruits, the ones who will replace those who fled. Teach them what you know, not just tactics and weapons, but loyalty, honor, the things that made you stand when others ran." Jake stopped walking. "Your Majesty, I'm not a teacher. I'm just a soldier. You are exactly what I need." She turned to face him. The old guard was taught that strength was everything, that the strong should dominate the weak, that loyalty was transactional, something bought and sold. I need guards who understand that real strength protects, not dominates, who see loyalty as a choice, not a transaction. Can you teach that?" Jake looked at this young queen who had faced death with courage. "2.